The GTX 1080 Ti is one of the most powerful gaming GPUs on the market. It's the first GPU in my opinion to actually be capable of a smooth gaming experience at 4K in AAA titles. And it's also been the perfect pair for my Acer X34 Predator. Of course though, with all of that power, we do get quite a bit of heat. And add-in board partners often opt for a 2.5 slot cooling design to maximize heat dissipation. I've been using the EVGA SC2 variant, which possesses a pretty effective 2-slot cooling design. Load temperatures usually sit around 75 degrees C in my personal system and then around 70 C on an open test bench. But today I'm going to explore an aftermarket heatsink from Rajan Tech called the Morpheus 2 and see just how much better this is compared to your typical add-in board solution and if it's worth the money. If this is the case, informed builders might be better off buying the cheapest graphics card model that they can without an exotic cooling solution, and then invest in an aftermarket solution like the Morpheus 2. It's not exactly cheap though, at $69 for both the standard and blacked out version named the Core. However, with a claimed 360 watt TDP rating, this should be pretty interesting. Now, you may notice that the Morpheus 2 is just a bare heatsink with no fans attached, and that's because you actually need to add your own 120mm fans. And while some may see this as reduced value or a rip-off, I really enjoy the flexibility that this gives to the user, seeing as both thermal and acoustic performance can be tailored to whatever you desire. For example, if you want the best cooling performance possible, a pair of fast, high static pressure fans like the EK Vardas would be a perfect match. Or if you want something a little bit quieter, you could use something from Noctua or Be Quiet. RGB fans are also on the menu if you want to light up your system. We're going to be using a pair of the 2200 RPM EK Vardas. I like the clean, blacked out look, and I'm pretty excited to see what the cooling performance will be like with these. Now, there's no reason that you couldn't just plug these fans into your motherboard, boot up a program like SpeedFan, and tune them to ramp up along with your GPU temps. However, a simpler solution would be to plug the two fans into a splitter, and then plug that splitter into an adapter for the 4-pin fan header onto your graphics card. That way, your graphics card is directly controlling the fans, and then you can jump into a software like EVGA's Precision XOC and modify the fan curve just as if you were using the stock cooler. And here's the compatibility list straight from Rajan Tech's website, which includes most high-end cards for the most recent generations. So if your card isn't on this list, I can't actually guarantee that it'll fit. Luckily, we're all good with the 1080 Ti. In terms of installation, it's pretty simple. First thing you need to do is remove the backplate from your graphics card, and then unmount the cooler with the 4 screws next to the GPU. Unplug any fan or RGB headers that are connected, and you should be able to pull the cooler away pretty easily, revealing the GPU and probably another cooling plate as well. The Morpheus 2 kit does come with its own aluminum heatsinks that you can use to cool the VRMs and VRAM chips, but I was pretty interested to see how the temps would be with the stock plate on there, since the thermal pads were a bit of a pain to use if I'm honest. The stock plate here does rely on contact with the SC2 cooler, but we'll see how we go without it. Next, we need to install that beastly Morpheus 2 heatsink, and it's up to you whether you attach the fans before or after installation. I decided to attach the fans prior to installation of the card, and it went smoothly. To install, screw the mounting brackets onto the bottom of the cooler, and then install the standoffs in the appropriate position. Next, apply some thermal compound to the GPU die contact area, and then screw the card down onto the cooler using the top mounting bracket with the metal portion of the bracket facing upwards, unless you want to fry your GPU. You should be able to get a pretty snug fit. I also tried mounting the cooler without the top mounting bracket so that I could try and use a backplate, but unfortunately the screws were a little bit too tall and the backplate doesn't fit. No problem though, because the finished product looks absolutely mental. The two EK Varda 120mm fans fit perfectly and really add to the high performance aesthetic, and honestly I'm very impressed with how the finished result looks even without a backplate. Of course, with the 1080 Ti now substantially thicker, you're looking at roughly a 3.5 slot card, so make sure that your case does have enough room. For example, now the card is way too thick for my Ncase M1 build, but I may try some low profile fans in the future and see how that fits. Now, time to look at the cooling performance and to see whether this was worth it at all. Here's the Mini ITX Ryzen test bench that we're running, and the components are kind of irrelevant seeing as we're just testing GPU temperature and fan noise here, and we're using Heaven 4.0 maxed out at 1440p for testing. Now for testing, I tested the Morpheus 2 against the EVGA SC2 cooler at 3 different fan levels. 1000 RPM, which we'll call our silent profile, 1500 RPM, which we'll call a more moderate level, and then 2000 RPM, RPM, which we'll call our performance profile. This should give us a good idea of the Morpheus 2's cooling capability given how loud you want to run your fans. So first, let's look at where the SC2 cooler falls with the fans running at 1000 RPM, and this is by far our hottest test of all. With the temperature limit increased to 90 degrees C, the 1080 Ti hits that within the 5-minute mark, and the core clock was starting to plummet to keep that under control. Now, here's where the fun begins. With the Morpheus 2 also running at 1000 RPM, we've got low temperatures below 60 degrees C, which is pretty damn impressive considering it was pretty much silent. With the SC2 cooler now running at 1500 RPM, we do see a drastic improvement compared to before, and now we're hitting a much more reasonable result of 73 degrees C, but still a far cry from the Morpheus 2 at 1500 RPM, now sitting at a cool 52.4, and at this point the boost clock was sitting very comfortably at 1950 megahertz or thereabouts. Okay, now let's look at the performance profile with the fans running at 2000 RPM. Starting with the SC2 again, we do see a significant improvement again here with almost a 10-degree reduction compared to before, now sitting at 63.8 degrees C. The Morpheus 2 though, now creeps under that 50-degree mark at 49.8, and this is a few degrees within what you'd get with a water block and a custom loop. So here we're seeing a 14-degree improvement at 2000 RPM, a 20.6-degree improvement at 1500 RPM, and over a 32.5 degree improvement for the silent profile when factoring in the thermal throttling. So GPU temps are definitely in check, but what about the VRM and VRAM temps? Well, I was pretty surprised to see that the Morpheus 2 was actually performing consistently better than the SC2 across all fan profiles, despite not having direct contact to the heatsink. At 1000 RPM, things are pretty even, with the Morpheus 2 having slightly better VRAM temps, but at 1500 RPM, there is a significant difference of 4 degrees for both the VRAM and VRMs. This is likely due to the fact that the EK Vada fans are able to push a substantial amount of airflow through the heatsink and get some effective cooling done on the other side. So at least for the EVGA SC2, installing the aluminium heatsinks that come with the Morpheus 2 won't really be necessary if you're happy with the stock thermal performance for the VRMs and VRAMs. Okay, now let's look at the sound tests for each cooler and see whether or not that extra thermal performance results in extra noise. And let's kick it off with the silent fan profile at 1000 RPM. So in terms of acoustic performance, both coolers were peaking right around the same levels, which was not a really significant difference. And I would say that the EK Vadas just sounded better overall, if I'm honest. So given the results, this is definitely something that I'd do if I was running a bigger case. The huge thermal improvement is really impressive and the setup looks pretty mean overall and runs a lot cooler than any add-in board partner cooler that I've ever seen, apart from AIO setups like the EVGA Hybrid. So, is it worth it? Totally. And the price premium that you'll pay is still cheaper than the most expensive cards out there, yet the cooling performance is pretty much untouchable. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to hit that like button as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.